Hello, and join me today as I talk about knitting, spinning, a shop update, and just general things that are going on in life. Come on in, let's get started. Welcome, Fiber Friends, to Fibercast number 8 of Sweet Mountain Crafts. My name is Carista, and you can find me online at sweetmountaincrafts.com, on Instagram as Sweet Mountain Crafts, Sweet Mountain Mohair, and Sweet Mountain Fiber. You can contact me via email at hello@sweetmountaincrafts.com. Come on in and join me today as I have lots of fun things to share with you. First of all, I'd love to welcome you to this podcast and hope that you will find something that you enjoy. If you're here as a returning viewer, welcome back. And if you're new, I hope there's something fun and exciting that you see that I share here as I share all my fun fiber projects with you. I have this fun cowl and hat set that was knit by or designed by Gingy Knits. It is actually named after me. It's called the Carista hat and the Carista cowl. So here they are as a set. They're just a cute, fun, all around go-to, super warm winter wear set for here in cold Wyoming. We are experiencing some warmer days recently, but hope to see some snow and some cooler weather come our way. So anyway, this was a fun set that Corinne designed using my Peak bulky weights. And this is 100% superwash merino wool that is just super fun to work with because it's chunky and bulky and it works up super quick. So Corinne actually knit the set for me so that I would have a chance to try it out, and I wanted to show it off today. I'll be sure to post links in the description box below so that if you're interested in purchasing these, they will be available that way. Purchasing the pattern for this or for these, they'll be available in the description box below. All right, life has been so incredibly busy. Let me get these off. It's a fun set, enjoyable to have. All right, so life has been incredibly busy. I'm just gonna sit here and just take a moment to say that I had hoped to have this podcast out last Friday, but we had the pleasure of hosting my family last Friday evening for my mom's birthday, and that was fun. We had most of my siblings, not all, but most were here along with their kids, and then actually the nieces spent the night, so that was a lot of fun. There were ages 8 through 15-year-olds, 6 girls, all spent the night and had a lot of fun just being girls and being cousins, and it was a good time. So my family all lives a little ways away from me. My closest brother, distance-wise, is an hour away from me, which isn't that far, but this has only been in the last couple of years that we've lived this close to each other. So that's new and fun for us. And then my sister has actually been overseas until recently, and so that was fun to have her stateside so that she could be here and participate in the family event. And then my mom lives about 5.5 hours away from me. So it was fun to kind of get everyone together and all convene. This was definitely a unique thing for us, but something that we totally enjoyed. I also had a very heart-wrenching moment, but also exciting moment as I watched my 18-year-old, my second oldest son, move out of the house last week. So a week ago, I guess, on Friday. And that was such an exciting thing. It's fun to see him start off on his own path, and he has lots of plans and lots of hopes for himself, but it's also, just one of those moments as a mama that starting to see my little ones grow up and move on. It's exciting. You want to see them spread their wings, but at the same moment, it's hard. Tears fall, and just achiness of seeing that happen. It's exciting to see what the plans are for him in the days ahead, but there were moments along with that as well. So I still have, at this point, 2 more kids at home that are doing online schooling at this time, and so I have yet still more to accomplish with with 2 kids yet at home to make sure that I'm here being participatory in their time while they're still schooling. Our oldest is also away from home at this point. He's almost 20. He'll be turning 20 this next weekend, and we're excited to see what he's already doing with his future. So lots of big changes in my life, lots of big changes at this moment in time, but that's a good thing. And that's part of the reason that I'm here with you all, because as all of these things transition and change, it's fun for me to have all my fiber related. Let's move into a little bit of what I've been working on, keeping me accountable. Here are some of the projects that I have either shown a little bit of my progress previously or have just started that I get to share with you. Let's start with my Comfort Fade Cardi. This is being held in a bag by Delightful Works. It is a Christmassy themed bag or a holiday looking bag, but since I started with my project in here, I'll probably go until the end in this bag. It's a good size for the sweater that I have in here. So this is my Comfort Fade Cardi. The pattern is by Drea Renee Knits. For those of you that have watched before, you've certainly seen some of my progress on this. I'm excited to say I'm now on the sleeves. And at this point in time, it's going to be hard for me to show this very well because I'm doing my sleeves 2 at a time. When I do sleeves 2 at a time, it does mean that I have yarn for each sleeve actively in progress, as well as I am doing a magic loop 2 at a time. So I have 1 cable going through both sleeves. You can kind of see that here, and they are being held on that single cable. So that's where it makes it kind of hard to open this up to show you very well my progress. I'll post a quick photo in here of the body of the sweater where I was before I started on the sleeves. But I am making good progress. I'm excited about where I'm at on this project and hope to be able to continue with it. I did make a few changes. One of the main changes is that I dropped down a needle size after I did my gauge swatch. I had to go down 1 needle size from what the pattern recommends. The other thing that I'm doing a little bit differently is I knit slightly faster in a stockinette stitch rather than reverse stockinette stitch. So stockinette stitch is where I would be knitting on the knit side of the fabric. Reverse stockinette stitch is where I would be knitting on the purl side of the fabric. And since I'm slightly faster at knitting rather than purling continuously, I'm doing it inside out. So I'm actually knitting my sleeves from the inside, and then when I get the sleeve completed, I'll just flip it to the outside, because this pattern is where the reverse stockinette side is the shown side or the exterior of the garment. So yes, I'm knitting this using Sweet Mountain yarn in my Daily Blessings line. This line will be coming back soon. I know I've said that a couple times, but I had some other projects that had to get accomplished first, and now that I have some of those things done, these yarns will be starting to show up in my dye pots very, very soon. I'm excited to bring this line back because they are colors that I love and I love working with. So I'm excited to bring that line back for sure. The next thing that I've been working on, this is for the Unity K cowl, which is it's a opportunity for knitters, crocheters to be coming together over our craft because of the things that we love about our craft. And it's the encouragement to be joining each other as we work through projects throughout the course of this year. This is being hosted, the K cowl is being hosted by Cedar Hill Yarns. And I will again have all that information down below. But I am working on, for that, my Brioche Adventure shawl. And this is actually being kind of held in 2 bags. So I have it in this bag, first of all, that was given to me by Cardi of the High Fiber Diet in a swap that we did. And the reason for that is because there are enough yarns that go with this project that they don't all fit in my smaller project bag as I'm working. But as I'm going, I am putting the current working yarns in this small bag by Unique Astrid and working from there. So here is, oh, and I'm halfway through a row, but here is my Brioche Brioche Adventure shawl so far. I'm loving how this is turning out. I think it's really fun to be able to put the colors all together that wouldn't necessarily have a reason to be put together, but with the brioche, it helps with that idea of kind of the fade working through. So you can see here, I have a stitch marker down here, or a progress keeper showing where I left off on the last podcast. And I've been able to knit more than double what I had done on the previous podcast. So I've worked from here up to here, and I'm making good progress. I am surprised. I forget how much longer brioche can take. So I was thinking that I'd be a lot further along by now, but it's not that it's overly cumbersome. Brioche isn't overly cumbersome for me. I enjoy doing it. It just takes a little bit longer because you have to think of it as almost like the length of time it would take to be knitting color work or something along those lines, because you're working both colors in every row. So the only times that doesn't happen is on these garter stitch sections right here, and that's where you're working a single color. So it's kind of a chance to take a break from the brioche, do a quick section of garter stitch, and then continuing with brioche. But I really am enjoying it. You can see I've gone from the reds into the blues, and then from there I will be slowly shifting into some grays and greens, and then some other fun colors as I get to the end. All of these yarns were minis that I received in a mini swap from a group of ladies on an Unsafe Space knitting chat. So I am fully enjoying it. I look forward to having the finished object. I think it's just going to be really colorful and fun, and something that could probably go with lots of outfits because of the colors, or even just be decorative. Hang it over my chair and have a little bit of a pop of color. So that's very fun. I'm definitely enjoying that. As it's growing, it's going to get harder and harder to be a project that I take with me places as I go, whether it's waiting rooms or whatever. It probably won't travel with me as easily as it's getting larger, but that's okay. I get a chance to usually sit and knit in the evenings when my family is watching TV or watching podcasts or whatever we may be doing in the quiet evenings. So that's when I tend to work on that. All right, the next thing that I'm working on is something that I've brought up the last podcast, my mini hexagon blanket. So after having brought that up, the whole point of Keeping Me Accountable is that by bringing it up with you guys, I feel a sense of need to work on a project because I want to be able to show you my progress. And that's exactly what's happening with the mini hexagons blanket. So thank you guys for being here and watching me and encouraging me, because otherwise I started these hexagons, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, and I just kind of work on a few here and there, but then they would sit for quite a while. So here I finally made some progress. First of all, I have added to my hexagon container. I have taken some out and put them into some flowers, or hexagon florets, I guess you might call them. But I have added some more hexagons, and so this pile kind of ebbs and flows as I take them out to use in the other thing I'm getting ready to show you. But then when I feel like it, I'll just take a moment, do some quick crochet hexagons. They take me about 10 minutes maybe each to crochet and then weave in ends and all that. And then I just put them in this little container. And then from there, what I've been doing, and this is fun for me to see them get to this point, I've been taking and crocheting them into, like I say, florets, flowers, whatever you may call them. They make me think of a grandma's flower garden hexagon quilt when they look like this. And I had a moment where I thought I might do just bare yarn, just a cream colored yarn around these and make them look like a grandmother's flower garden quilt, kind of like this. I'll put an image of a grandmother's flower garden quilt here. But I've decided instead that I think I really want the all over color. So I don't think I'm going to do the white other than for the connecting stitches. So what I'm doing to connect them is just a zigzag slip stitch in between. I actually found a tutorial online and I will link that below for what I thought created just a really cool look between the hexagons. So I'm using a bare yarn. It's a 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon base, fingering base. And it happens to be my scree sock base that I wind my own yarn from cones. And so I can end up with really random bits on the end of a cone when I get done with it. So rather than throw those away, I've been keeping them as I get them, and I kind of had been slowly gathering a pile. So I decided to go ahead and wash it up and get it ready to use. And so I've been using that on this. And you can see I just take 6 hexagons, put it around a central hexagon. There's really not much rhyme or reason to my color choices. I am just working to make sure that I don't put exactly same colors next to each other. So I'm not going to put 2 hexagons of the same yarn color next to each other. But aside from that, I'm kind of randomizing it. I'm not being very super picky or particular. And then my hope is that when I go to put them all together, I'll take 2 flowers and create a connection here, and then throw another one in and create a connection. And then as I go, my intent will be to, as much as possible, avoid putting like colors together. But other than that, I want it to just be really random, very scrappy looking. I love the look of scrappy blankets, and I think it's so much fun. I think this is something that I look forward to the finished product, but I am very much enjoying the production of it as well. So I know that there's the ongoing conversation of, are you a product knitter or production, or like a process knitter? And this project is one where I'm enjoying both. I look forward to the final product, but I'm enjoying the process too. So I'll continue with my hexagons in time to come, but again, that's just kind of a random, when I feel like crocheting, I'll pull that out, pick it up. Another crochet project that I've started is working with a magic knot ball. I created this magic knot ball, and it's quite large. You can see here beside my head that it's quite large. I used a bunch of scrap yarns, mostly like a 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, or an 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon, but all sock white yarns. These are minis or scraps from socks, minis that I may have received in an exchange or picked up somewhere. I don't always know where the minis came from. Sometimes they're leftovers from a dye job that I might have done or whatever, but it's just a good mix of colors. And what I did is I did a Russian join method in between. I'll put a link on how to do a Russian join in the description box. But I just made this massive ball, and with all kinds of minis. Some of the minis are longer than others. Most are probably, I'd say, about 7 grams or so or more. But yeah, just a random mix of minis. Again, kind of like with my hexagons, I wasn't super particular about the order of the colors. I just, more than anything, tried to avoid putting 2 like colors beside each other. But the ball itself is 218 grams. I started at 218 grams, and I just wanted to record that for myself so that I have an idea of how much this project may take. So what am I making? I'm working on the Crochet Granny Ripple Blanket, a pattern by Yarnspirations that is free online. It's considered an easy crochet level blanket, and it's just a basic granny stripe ripple. So I will put an image here of what the blanket will look like, at least the design of the blanket. And then the way that I'm crocheting it is I'm holding double my magic knot ball along with a yarn that was given to me. This is Caron Simply Soft. This is just an acrylic yarn. It's not anything super fancy. It is very soft and nice against the skin. It's a great blanket yarn. So I was given, I think, 10 of these. And with that many, and being that it's an acrylic yarn and that it's white, I think that the best thing to do with something like this is a blanket. So I wanted to do a blanket with it, but I wanted it to have a little bit of color because I tend to be more colorful than not. And I don't know if you guys notice that in my yarn choices or in my project choices, but I usually like a lot of color. So rather than just crochet with white, which would probably get very redundant and a little boring, I decided to start crocheting where I'm holding them together. Now I've just barely started. I did my basic chain to start. You can see it's going to be quite the wide blanket, but that will cinch in a little bit as the ripples start forming. So you can start to see I'm just getting the very basic introductory row completed. So this is where the ripple design begins. You can kind of see that there's the points going up and down here. And I'm looking forward to working on this more, but it is very much like my Hexagon blanket. It is kind of a side project. It's not a focus for me. It's more something that if I just want something that's not going to take a lot of thinking, once I get the initial row set up, then the remainder of the project should go fairly quickly without having to refer to the pattern. But as with anything, usually the beginning part is the hardest because you've got to figure out what the pattern's calling for. You've got to make sure that you're getting all your stitch counts right and everything lined up just so that you can make sure that the continuation of the project doesn't get ruined. The next thing I have on the needles is a new sock project. This is one that I had not originally planned on in my sock knitting projects right away, but I had a request and it was from a family member, so I want to make sure to go ahead and honor that request. And she wanted just a really pretty, kind of a darker teal or like a peacock green kind of color. So I dyed up this color for her and she wanted a pair of hand knit socks out of it. So you can see I've just started the toes here. I am thinking of knitting, because this has just enough tonality in it, there's a little bit of color variation, but not super distinct. So it is definitely a very, very light semi-tonal yarn. And what I'm thinking is that I'll do a Hermione's Everyday Sock. This is a free pattern available online. Again, I'll link to it here. Looking forward to working that pattern with these because it'll give it a little bit of texture without being overly complicated, so that hopefully I can get these socks done fairly quickly and then sent off to the recipient. So I'm looking forward to working on those, and I love the color I was able to get. Unfortunately, this was not a recipe I wrote down because I was just trying to match what was being requested, but it is a color that I could possibly replicate and might come out in some of my future dyeing. Anyway, very fun. So that's all of my current works in progress. I do have one other thing that you guys are keeping me accountable on, and that is my stash down. For stash down, I decided I needed something very, very simple in order to be able to keep track of incoming yarn and yarn that was being used. And the way that I'm handling my stash down is I'm going to be keeping, well, first of all, what is stash down? Stash down for me is making use of my existing yarn that I have on hand so that I can be making sure to be utilizing what I've purchased, all this beautiful yarn that I have, whether it's stuff that I've dyed or purchased from other indie dyers, or sometimes it is name brand yarns. I have so much yarn in my stash and I have so many projects in mind with that yarn. I very rarely have yarn in my stash that I don't have some idea of what I'm going to do with it. So rather than buying a whole bunch of new yarn, I decided that this year in particular I would be working on stash and trying to at least dwindle to some extent my stash. So my goal is to be using more than I'm bringing in. And for the month of January, and here I am on the last day of January as I record this podcast, I have already purchased new yarn. So my numbers are going to look a little bit skewed right now because of the way that I'm recording my stash down. So in my happy planner that I use, I decided that the simplest way for me to do this was I took the back page, which is actually the cover, and it has a slick surface to it. And I am putting a sticker I have lots of these dot stickers from years of homeschooling and using them with my kids as different things. So I have a ton of these stickers in my stash of old school stuff. So I decided that for every 100 grams that I bring into my stash, I will put a sticker. And then from that, every 100 grams that I use in my stash, I'll be able to move a sticker from here down to here. Now you can see at the moment that I have stickers of yarns having come in. These will be yarns that I'll demonstrate, or I'll show to you here in just a minute, of some new acquisitions I have. And you can see that right now this is empty. My reason for that is that even though I am currently using yarns for my stash, until I complete a project, I'm not going to count them as out of my stash. Part of the reason for that is the simplicity of measurements. I can easily weigh the yarns or read a weight off of the label as they come in. But while I'm actively working with the yarn, it is hard to tell how much of a skein I may use. So I might start with a 100 gram skein, but I may only use 70 grams of it. So until I'm completed with a project, I won't be able to record how much went out of my stash on specifically a project. So in order to be able to keep track of this, what I will do is as I complete my projects, so such as my Comfort Fade Cardi, let's say, when I get done with my Comfort Fade Cardi, I will calculate all the grams of yarn that was used for that project, and then I will move stickers from here down here. Or if need be, if I have fewer stickers up here than what I'm able to put down here, then I will just add more stickers. And then when new yarn comes in, they might pop back up here and vice versa. So the idea is that I'm slowly maybe adding here, but then moving from here to add down here, and we'll just see. We'll see how this goes. By the end of the year, my goal is to have more stickers down here than up here. We'll see what happens. So always, always, always at the beginning of the year, it's easy to set goals like that for yourself. And then somewhere along the way, it's easy to get off track. But my hope is that I'm able to stay on top of this and keep it somewhat under control. We'll see how it goes. Woohoo! I made it. So some projects that I did get done, and I am not choosing to include this in Stash Down. My Stash Down is just focused on my yarns that are already made. So yarns that have already been created, whether they've already been spun or they're purchased yarns, whichever way. I am not considering my fiber stash part of my Stash Down, partially because I'm still newer to spinning and my fiber stash is somewhat just now growing, I guess we might say. I'm learning a lot about fibers and trying to keep those organized. So I'm not working overly hard on keeping controlled measures on that stash as of yet, but there may be a Stash Down in the future for fiber. In the meantime, what I accomplished. So here I have my Christmassy yarn that I said, my Christmassy art yarn that I know I've mentioned on previous podcasts that I was working on. So I finally got it to its finished state. I am so excited about how this yarn turned out. It's probably my favorite art yarn to date. And even though it's Christmassy, I really wanted to get it at least to this point. And then I will probably, I have a very specific project in mind for this art yarn, a weaving that I want to do. But because it's a Christmassy yarn and because we have so many days yet until Christmas this year, I think I'm going to set this aside for now and pull it back out when I'm starting to get excited about Christmas again. As I said, I have a fairly specific project in mind with this yarn, but I'm not quite in the mood to do that yet because Christmas is a ways off. But with this yarn, you can see that I included lots of fun dimension and depth. I have a good chunk of it that's just coiled yarn. So you can see some of these here are just coils of the fiber that I use to spin. And then another good chunk of it, I used all kinds of extra mix-ins. So I used some chenille ribbon and some lace ribbon and some tulle, and I did an auto wrap with a crochet cotton that has a metallic thread in it. And yeah, I just had a lot of fun. I did a little bit of adding some locks in there just to create some added dimension. I had so much fun with this. And like I say, I think this is my favorite one to date. So I'm really looking forward to the finished project that I have in mind for that. But it was fun for me to just have that experience again of working with an art yarn, and it's kind of a new adventure every time I sit down to the spinning wheel to work on an art yarn, because you really have to be very flexible and not controlling. You have to be willing to just kind of let the yarn and the little bits that you're putting in it just kind of do their own thing. And I really like that. I really like that feeling. It's kind of the same way when I'm doing the freeform weaving. You just have to be very loose with it and very comfortable with things working out in a way that you might not expect or you might not anticipate, and just being happy with what you get. So I thoroughly love this yarn and look forward to working with it in the future. My next spinning project that I was able to complete was one of my bats that I made on my new drum carder. I took a bat from Green Goat Ranch, using Green Goat Ranch fibers that she had sent me. I just created a bat, and then from that bat I created a yarn. I was not overly particular about what kind of yarn I was creating. I just wanted something that was fun. I wanted to just play with the fibers. There's Firestar and Merino and Tencel, and I'm not even sure what all is in here as far as fiber content. So this was just going to be really fun, really playful. Not quite what I think of an art yarn being, but definitely more loose than a yarn that I would be spinning if I wanted to specifically knit or crochet with it. So my plan with this yarn is that I'm going to put it into a pile that I'm working towards accumulating of yarns that I hope to weave with. I think this one would be really beautiful woven up, and I'm not quite sure what I would use for the warp with it yet, but I think this is going to make a really pretty loom woven yarn. So this would be not one of my freeform weavings, but rather something that I would put on my floor loom and use as my weft on a floor loom. So I will be working with that in the future, but it'll go set aside for right now until I have more figured out of, like I say, what I'm going to use for my warp with this. And then I also want to use other hand spun yarns. I should say that I single plied it initially, and then from that single ply I did a Navajo ply or a chain ply to finish this off. So fun. It was exciting to get some of my spinning projects off of the wheel and out of the area that I keep them, because it tends to be right next to our TV room where I keep all my spinning projects, and that area was getting a little overwhelmed with some of my stuff, so it was time to clean up that space a little bit. Thanks for the encouragement. Let me show you some of my fun acquisitions. I have some yarn, which I had already suggested with Stash Down, that I have some new yarn acquisitions, and that's exciting and fun. I have some plans with some of these, but not anything specific with others. And then I have some other fun treats that I get to share with you guys today. Let's start with yarn. This time of year, it seems like there are many sales and stash downs or destashes, and lots of people trying to kind of clear the shelves or clear their spaces a little bit to be able to purchase or bring in some new things. So one of those happened to be at Cowgirl Yarn in Laramie, Wyoming. She's one of my stockists, and she had a really amazing sale on a number of her yarns, and she happened to have some of this. So this is Remix Light, and I've worked with Remix a few times now. It is just a really nice, comfortable, soft yarn that is actually, it's made in France, and it's called Remix because it's all 100% recycled fibers. So in this one, it has 30% nylon, 27% cotton, 24% acrylic, 10% silk, and 9% nylon. And so it is truly a recycled yarn, and I have enjoyed working with this in the past. So I wanted to buy some of the light. I've worked primarily with just Remix, which is either a DK or a worsted weight. I'm not positive which, but it's definitely heavier than this. And so I decided to go ahead and pick this up, and in the finer weight, more like a fingering or sport weight here. And I look forward to knitting a sweater with this. So I bought four balls of this. Each one of these is 100 grams with 432 yards. So that would be a fingering weight. Yes. So I don't have a specific sweater in mind just yet, but I do know that I want this to be a sweater, because I find that with the nylon being the predominant fabric or content fiber in it, and then the cotton being secondary, it still has a look of being warm, but it can be a little bit cooler. And I think that in the lighter weight, I think it'd make a great transitional season sweater. So whether it's springtime or fall, this one tends to look a little bit more fall. The color's called Patina, and it has a little bit of browns and earth tones in it, with gray being the predominant color. So I look forward to knitting something in that. So that's 400 grams of my incoming stash down yarns. And then this next package had yarn that is not only for me personally, but also some yarns that I wanted to play with for my shop. So let me show you what I bought for myself, and then I'll show you some that I'm going to play with a little bit for dyeing. These yarns came from Colleen. I found her online through a Facebook group, and she was having a de-stash of some of her yarns. So I decided to pick up a few things that I knew that I'd definitely be using. I'm trying, again, because of my stash down, I'm trying to make sure that I'm being careful of acquiring things that I know that I'll use, rather than things that are just going to go and sit in my stash. But one of the luxury things that I decided to purchase from her is this baby camel yarn. This is called Blythe. It's from Classic Elite Yarns, and it is 100% baby camel. There's 128 yards in 25 grams. So each one of these is 25 grams. And I thought that this would be really fun to experience what it is to work with camel. I've not knit, or I don't think I've ever had camel in my stash, unless it was a blend, but I'm unaware of that for sure. So I'm really excited to have this. Super soft, lightweight, and I look forward to working with it. The next de-stash that I got from her was some Patons Kroy sock. This was obviously a Hobby Lobby purchase that she made that was discounted at Hobby Lobby, and then she discounted it even further on her de-stash. But this is just a very simple purples, fuchsias, just a touch of gray in there. Anyway, a very good sock yarn. So I enjoy working with Patons Kroy sock for sure. So going into my sock knitting stash. Some other sock knitting yarns that I purchased from her are, and again, I love to purchase sock yarns, especially on a good de-stash or on sale, because I know that I always have people in mind that I'm going to be knitting socks for. So it's easy for me to purchase them like this, and then I've got the yarn ready to go, so that if I want to work on a pair of socks as a gift, I can, or if I feel like adding to my own sock drawer, because it's amazing how quickly socks they get worn out or whatever. I wear a lot of knit socks, so it's nice to have extra yarn on hand. So this is an opal. This is 100 grams at 425 meters. And just a really good Borneo Ricky is the color. So it is actually named after, it appears to be a gorilla. Such a great neutral grays with creams sock yarn. It will be an easy one to use either for gifting or even for my own sock knitting drawer. Some fun yarns of the same sort, also from Opal. This one is Sweet Squared and Spicy Squared, and they have some like cake pops on the front here. You can see the sock suggested on the back of what the sock may look like when it's knit. And it's, again, just this opal yarn. I really like the content of these is let's see, let me get this right. So 75% virgin wool, 25% polyamide. I have other yarns, or excuse me, I have other socks knit out of opal, and I really like the way that they feel. I like the way they hold up. And so when I saw that she had opal at a discounted price, I was happy to pick up some of these for myself. So this one's a fun one. We'll see if that's, again, whether it becomes a gift knit or socks for my own drawer. I'm not sure just yet. But then there was one more. This is an opal that she'd already opened up and used some of it. But again, you can tell just from the squish of it that it's probably that 75% wool, 25% nylon. And again, just really fun colors. That there are, I did weigh this, there are 70 grams here, which is easily enough for me to get another pair of socks out of. So even though it's not the complete ball of yarn, there's plenty here for me to get a sock set. Next, Colleen also had in her D-stash a bear yarn, and it happens to be one I haven't worked with yet. So she had 6 of these. I bought all 6 of them, and they are called Bear Hair, like H-A-R-E, the rabbit, Bear Hair. And it is a 80% wool, 20% Angora rabbit fiber. So I am excited to work with these. They're fingering weight. I don't think that this is a yarn base anywhere near anything that I have in my stash. So not only working with the base itself, but also the fact that it's a bear yarn, I decided to purchase this for my business just to be able to play with it and see. Sometimes I love trialing new bases, and it might not be something that I end up carrying in my shop in the future, but it also gives me a feel for if I do come across like an Angora wool blend in the future, gives me a little bit of an idea of how it takes the dyes. So again, this is from Knit Picks, and I don't typically use Knit Picks as a supplier. I have purchased some bear yarn from Knit Picks in the past, but they aren't one of my primary suppliers. So I'm not positive that this will be something that I carry in my shop in the future, but I definitely bought it more with shop business in mind. So this does not count towards my stash down. This is a business related purchase. The last thing that I have to share with you is not yarn or fiber actually at all, but it is fiber related. I went ahead and got these for a couple reasons. One, I love the idea of learning more about fiber in all its states, and I think that this is a great way to learn more about it. The other thing is this set is just so well constructed and beautiful, and I'm really excited to have it. So this is a John A. Meck wool comb set, and oh my goodness, guys, these are like weapons. Yikes. So they are rather large. You can see that this is a rather large, it's a 4-row wool comb. And so what happens with these, for those that aren't aware, is that when a fiber is newly washed and picked, a fleece is washed and picked. So let's say it's a sheep and it's been shorn off the animal. It still has some vegetable matter, some dirt. That is going to be washed first. Then from there it is picked, which is where it's put under a machine that lots of times has just multiple points, and it swings back and forth. And the reason for that is to kind of just open up those fibers and allow some of the vegetable matter, the vegetative debris, to fall out, or further dirt to fall out of the fiber. And then from there, it needs to be arranged in such a way that it makes it easier for taking to the next step. So with a wool comb, you place the fiber on here while it's still a little bit just a crumpled mess, a little bit kinky, a little bit matted together. You slowly take it on one wool comb, and then you use the other wool comb to kind of comb the fibers. You're just combing it out. It's kind of like think of a little girl having a tangled mess of hair, and you've got to go through the work of clearing that mess. So these wool combs work to clear up those tangles, and then from there it can be carded, and then from there it can be spun. So these wool combs are, like I say, rather dangerous looking. They're very sharp. The tips are super sharp, so it's something that I have to be careful of where I store these so that they aren't accessible to little hands. And the other thing that came with this, and I didn't bring it with me, but I do also have a clamp. So the idea is that I can put this wool comb in a stationary position on a table. And then the secondary wool comb I would use with, you know, holding it. And I will comb the fiber that way. When I get an opportunity to set this up and actually put it to use, I'll be sure to record a video so that you can see me using these combs. I actually have a couple fibers or a couple fleeces available to me to do this with. So I'm looking forward to playing with these a little bit more and getting a little bit better experience with this. But these are something that will predominantly stay in a stored position because they're just not something you want to keep out and accessible unless you're using them. All right, so the gal that I bought the combs from, the wool combs, is an avid fiber artist herself. She spins, she weaves, she might do some knitting and crochet, but she had some drop spindles available as well. So when I purchased the wool combs, I decided to go ahead and ask if out of those drop spindles, she said that there were a couple that she was planning to get rid of. So I just said, well, can you show me? And I'd be interested maybe in a couple. So one of them is this really pretty flower design on top. It's just a very simple wooden drop spindle that actually has really good movement. I think this spindle will get a lot of good use. The other spindle that I got from her is this one here. This one has, it's a type of stone. It might be marble or granite. It's hard for me to tell, but there's a type of stone on it. And again, it's a top whorl, which means that the whorl is here at the top of the shaft. And the stone on it is quite heavy, so it has some good motion because of that. But I'm finding that it's not the easiest to spin on. So it tends to bobble on me. So as I'm using it, and then it loses momentum rather quickly. So I don't know that this spindle is going to get as much use unless I get more practice with it and find that I can get better control. But when I spin it, and you can just see here, it tends to want to wiggle on me like that. And that makes for not great action because as that motion is happening down here, it's not putting the spin in the fiber the way that I'd like, as well as it slows the movement. The spin goes out of it pretty quickly. Now that was a pretty decent spin, but it's kind of like a top, like a toy top that wants to, as it's getting towards the end, it kind of wobbles funny and then falls over. So again, I'm not sure that the spindle will get as much use, but either way, I was excited to purchase these from her because she didn't have them priced excessively high or anything. And it's fun to play. It's fun to learn. For anyone that hasn't ever used a top spindle, or a drop spindle, top whorl or a bottom whorl, it's just a really simple concept. You're just putting twist into your fiber this way. So you're slowly adding fiber to and adding twist in your fiber as you go. This one in particular, I had to do a very short draw on it because the spindle doesn't spin super great. So I was able to get some fiber spun, but we'll see. I'll play around with it a little bit more, see if I get better with it. But in the meantime, it's not necessarily one of my favorites. For the start of this new year, I have a new color series called Flowers et Avis, which means flowers and birds. And I had a lot of fun naming this series, but I also had a lot of fun, and mostly fun, dyeing it. I had so much fun putting this series together. I'm excited to share these new colors with you, and I'll give just a brief explanation behind the name. So Flowers et Avis, flowers obviously are something that I use as inspiration oftentimes for my colorways. You'll see a lot of colors in my shop are named after flowers. Another thing that I loved about Floss is that it can also mean the blossom of like youth or just the start of a new thing. So it is kind of like the start of the new year in my mind, the flowering of the year, the beginning of the year. There's so many new things to come about in 2022, and it's exciting to see a new year. The other word, avis, which means bird in Latin, can also mean a sign or an omen. There is a sign of something to come. And at the beginning of a year, especially as we look for things around us and exciting things to give us hope and give us something that we're looking forward to, I thought that this was a great name for this color series. To start off, this is some of my Polworth dyed in the Floss at Avis colorway. This one I call Floss at Avis blended, and the main reason is that the colors here, as I was working with the colors in the pan, I kind of worked to smush the color around a little bit more. So you don't see as much of the individual colors here, but you definitely have a nice flow of color. So that's the blended. And this is 100% Polworth top as well. And this is Floss at Avis and just unblended. So these are the same colors. Actually, you can see a lot more of the pink in this one than you do in this one, even though the pink is here. There's points that it is in there. It's just not as strong or vibrant on this one because of the blending that happened. But here you see more of the individual colors coming out. I pulled out a couple of my other braids that have been in my shop for some time just to show how these colors work together with these. So here is Into the Forest, and this braid just works really nicely. I feel like the greens would blend so beautifully. It'd be such a pretty mix to be able to put these two together. So whether you did a single ply out of this and a single ply out of this and then double plied them, I can show that with blended as well. So you can see Into the Forest here with the blended. Again, these colors just look so fun together. I think that they would make beautiful yarn. Each of these braids is around 4 ounces, so that's greater than 100 grams, which means that if you have a little bit of fiber loss while you're spinning or something along those lines, there's a little extra there for you. The other thing with a 4-ounce braid is I feel like it's a really manageable length braid to be able to work directly from the braid if you want to. I think a little bit of pre-drafting helps for sure, especially since these have been dyed and then washed and then dried and all that. They might have a little bit of compactness to them, but for the most part, I find that this Polworth is fairly lofty and fairly easy to work with, even directly from the braid. So one other color that I pulled from my shop that I have currently, this is called At the Morn, and this is from my spring series from last year. One of my colors from a spring series I did. And this At the Morn is just, it's a really pretty pink with just a hint of orange underneath. So there's a little bit of a peach tone in some parts here. And again, I think this just goes so lovely with this. So I think that all 3 of these would be just such a fun project to work on. You could create a really fun faded color set of hand spun yarns that would work beautifully in a single project. So I pulled those all out today to show you for sure, because yeah, when I work on dyeing something like this, I get so excited and I start dreaming myself, and I'm like, oh, if I had all the time in the world, I would probably grab some of these right away and use them myself. But of course, time is a limiting factor, and that's a good thing because it makes these available to other people that might be able to get to them before I can. My Floss at Avis color series is something that I use not only on my fiber braids, but also on individually dyed yarns. Each of these yarns has been inspired by either a bird or a flower, and so that's where they get their names. This one is Peony. It is a beautiful light pink with just areas of pale blush. All of these yarns are semi-tonal. They're dyed on, this in particular is Butte Sport Weight, which is my 100% superwash merino wool. This would be a great sweater weight of yarn, and with the other colors that I'm about to show you would make an amazing colorwork sweater. Here is my Dove Gray. This is a color I've dyed before in the shop, but this is the first time that I've had it included in a color series. Again, it has some slight tonality and it's a perfect neutral. It's just such a pretty, easy, soft gray. Vinca is a color that I gave a little bit of a sneak peek of on a previous podcast. It is based on the Pantone color of the year, Very Perry. So it is purple with blues throughout. So it has a slight periwinkle look to it in places, but it's definitely a deeper, what I think of as a deeper tone than a traditional periwinkle. Vinca, though, is the Latin name for periwinkle, which is the flower that this one is named after. Next, I have Novare. Novare in Latin means to refresh or to renew. That is what I think of when I see this color. It just looks like the excitement of a new and a fresh beginning. It also is part of the reasoning for the name behind this series at the beginning of a new year. So this is Novare, a nice soft sea foam. Then I have Superb. Superb is named after the superb starling. This bird is a beautiful bird with blue and green iridescent colored feathers, and I love the colors that you see there. So the bird also has orange on it, but for this I just wanted to focus on those blues and greens, so I call this one Superb. Another color that's not part of this color series but is on the same Butte Sport Weight base is my Trail Hike. Now this is one of my end of the day dyes. Actually, from here on out, I think what I'm going to do is most often call my end of the day dyes Trail Hikes. I might name them Trail Hike plus maybe a number or an additional name with it, just so that I don't confuse one batch from another. But this was an end of the day dye pour. You can see I did a little bit of a type of speckling, not true speckles, it's more spotted, but this is on the same base as these. So I thought that these actually, some of these colors look really good with this and would make a really fun shawl, hat, mittens. Anyway, these just go really nicely together. The gray also goes with this really well. So I found that even though this was an unexpected pour, it was not planned out. It's a beautiful, fun, exciting yarn, and with these more tonals, it definitely livens up the palette. All of these are available currently in my shop, just as you saw in the Sport Weight, Butte Sport Weight. Now I have these same colors, but they are on my Alpine DK. So Alpine is a 100% Targhee wool from Wyoming. It's raised and processed here in Wyoming, and it takes the color beautifully. I love the texture of this yarn. It's still a very natural yarn without being itchy or uncomfortable. This is actually the same yarn base that I used for my Christmas cash kit last year, and it's also the same base that I've used to knit a sweater for myself. I love this yarn base. It's definitely one of my all-time favorites. So this is a DK weight. This is Peony again, and Dove. And then I have Vinca and Fuzz. And here is Novare and Superb. So all of these colors again on the non-superwash wool, because the Butte Sport Weight is a superwash merino. These are a non-superwash wool. The colors appear just slightly different. So let me show you a comparison, but they're equally just as beautiful. It just takes the color a little bit different. The dye works just a little bit differently on a non-superwash versus a superwash. But you can see there, the color variation on the superwash is a little more dramatic, a little more apparent, where on the non-superwash it's more blended, it's more subtle, but it is still there. Let me show you one more time with Superb. Here's the comparison between the two. They're very, very similar. The colors, I would say the colors are almost spot on the same, but the tonality changes slightly between the superwash versus the non-superwash. The reason for that being that on the superwash, the dye strikes just a little bit faster than the non-superwash. So on a non-superwash, it has a tendency to spread throughout the wool a little more before it finally strikes. The other main difference that I find when I'm dyeing these is that the non-superwash takes the dye at a much lower heat than the superwash. I have to take this up to a little bit higher heat, which is a little tricky because since it's a non-superwash, it can felt. So I have to be very careful to take it to a higher heat without allowing it to felt. But all of these yarns, again, they just turned out so beautifully. I'm super excited about this color series. I am going to say that there was a pattern released just recently by Jessica McDonald called the Blizzard sweater. And she also has this same sweater in a child's form called Skift. And these sweaters are knit using a DK weight wool. And because non-superwash wool is a little bit more grippy than the superwash, it's a perfect yarn for knitting color work. And I think that her sweater pattern, it's a beginner color work sweater pattern. She wrote it to be very clear. She's doing tutorials as well. And I think a sweater knit with these colors, you could choose just two. You could do something like Superb and Dove, or Superb and Novare, even if you wanted a green tone. You could mix it up. You could even add in another color or two and and instead of just using two colors, you could do 3 or 4 colors in that pattern. I just think her sweater would be so pretty knit up. And the sweater that she knit, the design that she produced, it does call for a DK weight yarn. So I think these would be beautiful in that. Again, if only I had enough time, I would be casting on a Blizzard sweater like today if I had time. But so it goes, every day for itself. If anyone should ever use the Butte Sport Weight or the Alpine DK to knit a colorwork sweater, please share it with me. You can use the hashtag Sweet Mountain Yarn on Instagram or Facebook, and I do see those posts, so be sure to share. And I love to reshare, so if it's possible that you have an account that allows me to, I like to be able to reshare in my stories what you guys are doing with some Sweet Mountain yarn. All right, continuing with the Floss at Avis colors, I decided to do a blended sock set. So here again, we see those same colors that I've been working with, and I made a sock set that has a coordinating hankette. I call these my full hanks, and these are hankettes, my minis. So this is on my scree sock base. This is a beautiful yarn base. There's 389 yards in 100 grams here, and then there's 78 yards in the mini. So this is a 20 gram mini. And I think that this, again, would just be a beautiful sock set. I only put 3 of these in the shop initially because I wanted to just see what it looked like and kind of play around with it. If they sell out, I may get a chance to re-dye, but if not, just know that this is in the shop right now and would make just a really fun, just super sweet looking pair of socks. Lots of times with my minis, I use these for heels, toes, and cuffs, although you could easily use this set for a hat with stripes, or a pair of mittens with some colorwork design on it, or a pair of socks with striping instead of heels, toes, and cuffs. You can certainly use these sets in so many different ways. The other things that I did with similar colors, this is my Boulder Bulky base, and this is again using the Floss at Avis colors. This is Winter Dream. Sorry, I had to think for a moment. This is Winter Dream, and it is just a nice blend of those colors. The other one that I did, this is similar colors, they're not exactly the same. I did throw in a color in here that is not in my Floss at Avis series, but this is called Mountain Chill, and it's just a fun speckled bulky weight yarn. The great thing about bulkies is that they always knit up or crochet up really quickly. These are a 100% superwash merino yarn, so they have a nice soft squish to them, but they also do wash well enough that I would never probably put it in the dryer, but I would be willing to throw this on a delicate cycle in the machine and then lay it flat to dry. Any finished projects that I did with these. All right, I have 2 more things that are in the shop. Actually, technically 3, but they are in a completely different color series, in a completely different direction from the Floss at Avis. So first, I want to introduce to you Erica and Daphne. So Erica and Daphne are named after the podcast hosts on Rose Opal Knits. They had, when I contacted them to do a sock set for them, I dyed up the Rose Opal Knits sock set that I'll show here. And from that set, the minis or the hankettes that I made to go with that set, they both loved them so much that they pleaded with me to dye up those colors on full skeins. So here I've taken the orange, and this is a semi-tonal. It's a very light semi-tonal, meaning that there's not a super dramatic color change, but this one is Erica's favorite color. She loves a dark orange. So this is her favorite color that I did and named after her. And then Daphne loves a dark mustard or goldeny color. And so I did hers based on her. And these two are available currently. I put quite a few of these in the shop so that if you happen to watch Rose Opal Knits and you are participating in their make along, you can buy these yarns as well to be a participant in that make along. There's also going to be prizes, and I hope to be contributing some prizes myself. I need to get those sent off to those ladies, but they do have a make along going on. Their information is available in the show notes. So that is Daphne, or Erica and Daphne. I don't know if I mentioned, these are on my scree sock base. My scree sock base is a 4-ply, 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon. It is an amazing base to work with for almost anything. I would make pretty much anything out of this base. It is a fingering weight, but it would work beautifully both in sweaters and socks and hats and mittens and gloves and shawls and scarves. There's probably not anything that I wouldn't enjoy knitting out of this base. And then last but not least in my shop talk news, one of my so exciting fun projects that I've been working on is Susan of Delightful Works that has sewn up that bag that I've shown you many times that's holding my Comfort Fade Cardi. She and I started communicating back and forth about the idea of doing some collaborations. We worked together to pick out fabrics for a sock project bag. This one happens to be mine, so it's a little bit different. My top fabric matches this color down here, where the other ones that are listed online have kind of the background tone here. This pinky peach color is the top fabric, but otherwise the construction is all very similar. They are beautifully constructed drawstring bags with the drawstring and then the handle on the side. She has her pretty little tag here with Proverbs 31:13 listed on it. And on the inside of the bag is a great little interior pocket. So I am so excited about these bags. I really wanted to just start doing more bags in my shop. And while I do so, I don't often find as much time to sew like I'd like to. So it's very fun for me to have her bags in my shop at the moment. What I did is I took this yarn, and once I received the bags, then I made sure to take the colors that I was seeing in the fabric and pull them out into a sock set. So this is actually a kit. This is called my Sweet Nothings kit, and I have a limited edition of these. I've already sold a number of them, so I don't know how many more there are in the shop at the moment, but there are still some sets available. I dyed the yarn. As you can see, it's got some tonality to it, some variegation, and then it also has some speckling throughout. I really wanted to focus on the green because I find that green is such a great neutral tone for socks specifically that it works just really well, but I did like the pops of pink throughout that kind of echo the pinks that you see here. And then, of course, the chocolate. So chocolate is definitely a favorite of mine. It's something that I enjoy in almost all forms, although I tend to be more of a dark chocolate girl, but I do love and enjoy chocolate. So to make sure that I pulled that out better and showed that off a little bit more, I dyed the coordinating hankette to be a dark chocolate color. And that's what I thought of when I first saw this bag. with these dark chocolate circles on these flowers. It just makes me think of chocolate candies. So this is my set that's available. It comes in 3 different yarn bases. I have Scree Sock, which I just spoke about. That is an excellent yarn base. It's very durable. It's just a really great all-around base. Then I also have my Plateau Sock, which this is actually my Plateau Sock here. And Plateau Sock is still a fingering weight, but it is a 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere, and 10% nylon. So it's just got a little bit extra luxury to it. And because of that, it is a little bit higher priced, but it is a beautifully soft yarn. And I find that this yarn in particular, being that it's a superwash, it can go through the machine. And when I have knit with 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere, 10% nylon in the past, the yarn seems to just blossom a little bit more. It just fluffs up that little bit more when I wash it. I love 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere, 10% nylon, just for its coziness. It has just a great hand to it, and it just takes it to another level. The other yarn base that I have is a DK sock base. This is a DK weight yarn, but I bought specifically a sock base that is not fingering weight, but it is with nylon. And at this point, I have carried DK weight yarn in my shop that was 100% superwash merino. I love that yarn. It's super soft. I would knit a sweater any day in it. But because it didn't have the nylon, I was getting a little nervous about using it as my sock base. I decided to go ahead and trial a DK weight base that has a nylon content in it so that it has some elasticity and some ability to be worn on the feet a little bit better, and hopefully have a little more longevity to it. We'll see. If you guys have opinions on this as you work with this base, let me know. I'm just curious. I want to start carrying the DK weight option for sock sets more often, and I want to make sure that I'm providing a product for my customers that you guys are excited about. So again, this Sweet Nothings, you get to choose whether you want Scree sock, Plateau sock, or DK sock. That's all for my shop talk. So till next time, I have a few podcasts that I want to mention really quickly. One that I just recently came across. I don't know that she's putting out new episodes, but I have been enjoying watching through some of the episodes that she has up. It's called Soulful Spinning, and it's by Lisa. She has just some beautiful cinematography and beautiful pieces of things that she's working on. I'm enjoying just seeing what she's doing. And I just really, really enjoyed watching some of Lisa's podcast. I hope to go back and watch most of the episodes, and I'd love to think that maybe Lisa will post more at some point, but we'll see. Another person that I really enjoy watching is Sherry Iris. She is very skilled with all kinds of dyeing, beautiful dyeing that she does, she and her son. And then she also does a lot of handwork. Now she's much more of an embroiderer than I am. I don't do that much embroidery. I find myself not taking the time for that, but she does show some beautiful pieces, and I just really like Sherry's projects that she's working on and all the things that she shares. Another podcast I like to watch is Serenity in Stitches. And this is a newer to me podcaster as well. This is Christina, and she is an avid crocheter. She's made so many blankets, and I am still just getting to know Christina a little bit through watching some of her podcasts. So happy to share with you some of her work, and hope that you will check out some of these podcasts. In the meantime, I finished reading Brave New World. I enjoyed that book and enjoyed getting the opportunity to listen to it. It turned out as I expected in so many ways. And like I said, I was quite familiar with the story without having ever read it myself. So it is definitely one to take note of and enjoy. I'm still reading and have made some progress on the Brothers Karamazov, and we'll see if I get through that definitely in 2022, hopefully before May. Maybe we'll say that. Maybe I'll get through that book by May. In the meantime, I'm looking forward to listening to more Outlander soon and doing all the stuff. So Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, for seeing so many fun projects that I'm working on and listening in about all my shop talk. So I have had lots of things happening and I'm excited to share. But I look forward to interacting with you guys more in the days ahead, and hope you have a great rest of your week. All right, bye-bye. Let's see. Nope.